Yo, Bafito boy, Hamilton, Nitini Water, your future advocate. So, let's go straight into our today's segment, which is the hottest one. It is the Julius Malema CIC firearm case. So, you have heard me right. This is a Julius Malema firearm case. It is the Julius Malema CIC firearm case. So, let's go straight into it. Now, it is now common cause that Julius Malema has been found guilty with unlawful possession of firearm, unlawful possession of ammunition, discharge of firearm in a build-up area, and also been found guilty on failure to exercise reasonable precaution on persons and property, and reckless endangerment of persons or property. So, those are the 5 things that he has been found guilty on. Now, there's a problem with that guilty verdict. There is a problem. There is a fatal problem with regard to that. One, what the court or the judge has done is that she has equated what we call brief handling of the firearm with possession. Right? Let me repeat that. The fatal error and mistake that the court, the judge herself has done is that she has equated what we call a brief handling of the firearm with possession. That's a fatal error that she has done. Now, with that is that the entire state case will collapse if possession in law is not proved. Let me repeat that. Right? The problem with that is that the entire state case will collapse if possession in law is not proved. Now you're asking when can that be done? Mind you, Malema will take this matter on appeal. Then that's where everything is going to be collapsed, right? This guilty verdict, of course, its sentence is going to be handed down next year, right? Now, Malema will take this matter on appeal. Hence, I'm saying the fatal error that the judge has done is going to be exposed on appeal because she has made a fatal error. She has equated a brief handling of the firearm by Julius Malema with possession. Now, in my next segment, right, I'll take you guys further, deeper and deeper, so that by the time the sentence is handed down next year, you already know what is going to happen immediately after Malema takes the matter on appeal. Because I believe that when it comes to this one, I think the judge has made a fatal error, and I won't be surprised when she suspends, some of the guilty verdict, when the judgment is going to be handed down. So I won't be surprised when she does that, because honestly speaking, she has made a fatal error. So let's meet in our next segment where I'll be dissecting the matter even deeper. Yes, so boy, Hamilton, it's your future advocate. I'm out. Yo, my favorite boy, Hamilton, your future advocate. So let's go straight into our today's segment. We'll be talking further about Julius Malema CIC firearm case. Yes, you have heard me right. It is the hot one. My inboxes, I think they are full by now. My inboxes are full by now. So please, guys, be patient. Be patient as I'll be breaking it down for you. Just be patient. I'll be posting each segment per day so that you are able to internalize it, right? I don't want to create what is called analysis paralysis. No. I'll be posting each segments daily so that you digest it nicely, and allow you to go and do your own research and come back ready for my next segment. So that's how the law works. So yeah, let's go straight into it. Now, into our today's segment, we'll be talking about what I call unlawful position of firearm. Yes, we'll be talking about what is called the unlawful position of firearm definition according to the Firearms Act. Yes, that's what we're talking about today. And the reason why we're talking about that, right, is to make you understand that for the state to be able to charge you or Malema in this instance, they were supposed to be able. That's according to the Firearms Controls Act. It's not according to me. That's according to the Firearms Control Act, right? For the state to be able to charge Malema with unlawful possession, right, of the firearm, right? They were supposed to prove two things. They were supposed to prove two things. And those two things, they were supposed to exist simultaneously. They were supposed to exist simultaneously, those two things. Now, the first one is, one, the state was supposed to be able to prove that, one, there was what is called detention, right? Simply means that physical control of the firearm. Now, in this case, the state was supposed to prove that, yes, Malema did have physical control of the firearm. That's the first leg of the definition, according to Firearms Act. That's the first leg. Now, the second thing that we're supposed to prove is a second leg, which is called animus possidendi, right? It is called animus possidendi. That simply means that the intention is to possess and also have physical control of the firearm so that you can use it later, as your own independently, right? Now, why that is important? That simply means that not only must the state be able to prove that Malema had physical control of the firearm, but they must also be able to prove that Malema had intention to possess and also physically control the firearm so that he can use the firearm as his own independently, right, from the owner. Now, the problem with that is that the state must be able to prove that both of those legs existed simultaneously. The problem with that is that the state must be able to prove that both of those legs, right, belonging to the definition of the unlawful position of the firearm according to the Firearms Controls Act, they need to prove that both of those legs existed simultaneously. So, which means it won't be good enough for the state to prove that, yes, Malema did have physical control of the firearm. It won't be good enough if they are not able to prove the intentions that, no, he also had intention to possess and also a physical control of the firearm independently from the owner. Now, they must be able to prove both of those legs, and those legs must exist simultaneously. Now that I've set you guys up nicely so that you understand where I'm going on this, right? Now that I've set you guys nicely, right now, I would want I'm tempted to take you guys to the video, right? I'm tempted to take you or drag you guys or send you guys to the video and say, if you have watched the video, that's good. If you haven't, please go and watch it. Please go and watch it, right? So that in my next segment, when I elaborate, when I go deeper, right? We are at least on the same page, right? But let me give you guys the taste, right? Let me just give you guys the taste, without divulging more on what I'll be talking about in my next segment. But guess what? In my next segment, right, I'll also show you, or I'll also show you the weaknesses that expose the state's case that actually the second leg was missing. In my next segment, I'll also show you the weakness and prove to you that actually the state's case, there were weaknesses, right? And those weaknesses, right, expose everything, that actually the second leg was missing. The second leg, when it comes to Julius Malema, which is called animus possidendi, right, was missing. So, in short, which means based on the state's own biggest evidence, I'm just giving you guys the snippets, based on the state's own biggest evidence, in this case, which is the video, the second leg is missing, which is animus possidendi. But guess what? The first leg is there, which is called detention, physical control. Now, that one I'm giving it to the state. Yes, they are able to prove what? The first leg, which is called physical control. But the problem is that Malema only handled, according to their own version, according to their own video, right? You can go and watch it. Malema only handled the firearm for 10 seconds. 10 seconds. And immediately returned the firearm to the owner. Now, that act on its own negates the second leg, which is called animus possidendi, which simply means intentions to possess and also a physical control of the firearm. So in this instance, it simply means that the state's own evidence, right? The state's own evidence, which is the video, right, is contradicting their own inferences that they are trying to make. The state's own evidence, biggest evidence, mind you, the state's biggest evidence is the video, which was clear for everybody to see. But the problem with that is that the inference that they made is not informed by their own biggest evidence, which is the video. Now the problem is, the inference that they've made, that Malema had intentions to possess the firearm and also, control it so that he can use it as his own, independently from the owner, is not informed by the video, because by looking at the video, that leg is missing. If Malema did have intention, he wouldn't have returned. He wouldn't have returned the firearm. He wouldn't have returned the firearm. Now, I believe that I've set you guys up nicely. So yeah, man. Enjoy this one. Enjoy this one. Enjoy this one. I'll be taking it deeper in our next segment. I'll be taking it deeper. So yeah, man. If you haven't watched the video, go watch the video. If you have seen it, good for you and you know what I'm talking about. But this is what you must keep in mind. Malema handled the firearm, or let me say this, Malema briefly handled the firearm for 10 seconds. That's the first leg of the definition of unlawful possession of the firearm. That's the first leg. He handled it for 10 seconds. So basically, the first leg ended in 10 seconds. The first leg of the definition of the unlawful possession of the firearm, the first leg, which is called detention, physical control, ended in 10 seconds. Then the second leg of the definition, which is animus possidendi, started from 11 seconds upward. But the problem with that is that by that time, Malema did not have possession. By that time, Malema did not have, control. He only had control for 10 seconds. Then after that, Malema did not have control of the firearm. Because Malema, what he did, he immediately returned the firearm to its owner. Now, which means from the state's own version, their own evidence is contradicting what the magistrate was inferring to. Because, the charge of unlawful possession of firearm, right, is something that needs to be proved. You cannot just make inferences, right? And the unfortunate part with this one is that it's not as if the state, right, or it's not as if the magistrate did not have evidence to look. It is not as if he did not have some form of an evidence that he can peruse and look. He did have, is the video. Now, it is mind confusing that as to when he made that inferences, her inferences were informed by what? Because the second leg, the video itself is negating the second leg. So because the second leg does not exist, is not attributed to Malema, it does not exist. So you cannot make inferences which are not informed by the evidence. So the judge made an inference that Malema had unlawful possession of the firearm. And the inference that he has made was not informed by the very same biggest evidence that the state has. The evidence itself is rebuking the inferences made. It's contradicting the charges themselves. So the least that they were able to charge, which of course does not even carry the 15-year sentence, that we were able to get away with, is the issue of is the first leg, which is detention, physical control of the firearm. That's the least, but the unfortunate part with that is that it does not carry, physically controlling the firearm does not carry the minimum sentence of 15 years, which is good for Malema. Nor will it affect Julius Malema's participation in parliament. The least that will happen, he might end up paying the fine. But now the biggest part, which could have had which would have triggered the minimum sentence, is the very same second leg that the state has dramatically and fatally failed to prove, which is the second leg. The intention to possess and also control the firearm so that he can use it as his own, in the absence of its owner. So, based on the video, based on the state's own vision, because the video represents the state's vision. Now, based on their own video, the second leg is missing. Now, the question is, whatever inferences that the magistrate has made, they were informed by what? What informed the second leg, the unlawful possession of firearm? What informed that? Number two, what informed the charges themselves? What informed the charges themselves? Because if you are going to have evidence, a visual evidence, a video, but you still contradict what you are saying, you begin to make inferences. What informed that? Because not only was the magistrate wrong, even the charges themselves, they were, I don't know exactly what informed those charges, because if you are going to rely on the video, all of us, we've seen the video, and what we saw, it was a brief handling of the firearm by Julius Malema. Physical control, which is detention. Yes, that the state can prove. But now what was missing is the intention. Because you cannot make inference that no, he intended to keep the firearm and possess it so that he can use it as his own. If Malema only used the firearm for only 10 seconds and immediately returned the firearm to the owner. Now, your inference is that his intentions was to keep it. Are informed by what? Because at the end of the day, he did not keep it. He returned it and he briefly handled it for 10 seconds and returned it. So let me bring it home and give an example. If your friend borrows you, or if you borrow your friend's phone, right? Or your friend borrows you his or her phone, then you make use of it. You briefly make use of it. You take few photos or you take videos just for 10 seconds. And then you immediately returned it to its owner. Right? Then what is that? What is that? You see, that simply means that you have briefly handled it and returned it. So you cannot be found, you cannot be charged and say you intended to keep it. Right? You intended to keep the phone. But whilst the visuals are clear that no, actually you have returned the phone. You've used it briefly for 10 seconds. So nobody can come and start making inferences that you intended to keep it. The fact that I've returned, so because you cannot use two destructive versions of the same fact. You cannot say, yes, I've returned it, and yet at the same time say, I intended to keep it. Those two destructive versions cannot coexist. One must die. So here, your boy Hamilton Nitimota, your future advocate, let's meet in my second segment. I'm out. Yeah, perfect. So boy Hamilton Nitimota, your future advocate. Yeah, man. So let's go straight into our today's segment. We'll be continuing, we'll be diving deeper, further into Julius Malema, the CIC firearm case. So here, man, let's go straight into it. Now, in our today's segments, we'll be talking about what we call the undisputed facts, right? Using the state's own version, right? We'll be talking about what is called the undisputed fact. That simply means that we are talking about the fact that the state itself is not disputing that they are correct, right? So we'll be talking about the facts, the undisputed facts that the state itself is not disputing that they are correct. So they basically agreeing that these are the facts, and then this is what happened, informed by the video itself. Remember, the video is the biggest evidence that they have, to charge and ultimately convict Malema for all the charges that I've alluded to. So now let's go straight into it. Now, by me doing this, right, I'll further expose that, listen, the second leg that is required by Firearms Controls Act does not exist, right? It will show, basically I'm trying to create the links just to expose and show you that the second leg that the state desperately needs for them to be able to convict and find Malema and ultimately rightfully so charge, right? And sentence Malema for the unlawful possession of the firearm. The second leg that they need, right? I'll further expose that it does not exist. Now, let me start with the first one. Now, the state doesn't dispute that one, the firearm belonged to the security company. Number two, the state is not disputing, they are agreeing that the owner of the firearm was present on the day, was also seen in the video. Then number three, the state is also not disputing that Julius Malema had brief control of the firearm, which was at least 10 seconds, right? And he also fired the firearm. Then number four, the state is also not disputing that Malema immediately returned the firearm to the owner. Now, based on what I've just said there, what you realize is that one, There was no retention of the firearm by Julius Malema. There was no such. There was no retention of the firearm by him. But what we see is the opposite. We saw Malema returning back the firearm. Then number two, there was no safekeeping of the firearm. There was no safekeeping of the firearm by Julius Malema. But what we saw is Julius Malema returning the firearm back to its owner. Then number three, there was no control ammunition, right? There was no control ammunition by Julius Malema. Now, all those things, right, they don't exist. All those things, we did not see them. The biggest evidence that they are relying on, one, that they relied on it to charge and eventually hand down the guilty verdict, right? The very same video negates everything, all the inference that they've made. You cannot see them on that video, right? You cannot see them. But all that we see is the opposite. One, there was no retention of the firearm. Two, there was no safekeeping of the firearm. Three, there was no control of there was no control of the ammunition by Julius Malema, right? There was no control over ammunition by Julius Malema. So all those things they are missing, they don't exist, they are not there, and they are not attributed to Julius Malema. All that we saw is the opposite, right? Which seeks to suggest that Malema only had a brief control of the firearm and immediately returned it back. Now, I'm going to use authorities, right, to try and persuade and argue, right? I'm going to use authorities, and these authorities are three. I mean, if you know others, you'll assist. I'm going to use S versus Nkosi. Then I'm also going to use S versus Mbule, and also go as far as to use S versus Motsema. Now, these authorities, right, they'll be guiding us, they are teaching us, right, as to what is it that ought to have happened, to such that they go as far as to try and clearly define the trees from the woods, right, so that we are informed about our law. Now, the first one, which is S versus Nkosi, tells us that, listen, temporarily handling of the firearm without the intention to control it does not equate to possession. Now, S versus Nkosi is teaching us that temporary handling of the firearm without the intention to exercise control does not constitute possession. Now, S versus Mbulu goes further now to tell us that possession requires dominion and control, not fleeting physical contact. S versus Mbulu is telling us that possession requires dominion and control, not fleeting physical contact. Then thirdly, S versus Motsema, right, is telling us that the state must investigate intentions to possess independently of mere use. Let me repeat that. S versus Motsema is telling us that, listen, the state must investigate intention to possess independently of mere use. Now, that simply means that, one, all the charges, let's start the bigger charges, the unlawful possession of the firearm, right, is negated by the very same evidence, which is the video that the state is heavily relying on. You cannot see that. So basically, according to S versus Motsema, right, the state was supposed to investigate the intention to possess independently. Now, what the state has done, they became lazy. What they did is this. They said, no, because Malema briefly handled the firearm and made use of it, therefore that simply means that he had possession of the firearm. That's why he was in a position to make use of it and fire in the air. Without fully understanding and grasping the legal definition of possession in law and the legal position of detention, which is physical control. They did not fully grasp and fully appreciate the definition of intention to possess, to possession in law, right? And the legal definition of physical control in law. They did not appreciate their definition. They were lazy to fully grasp and understand that these two things, right, they are different in law. Physical control is not the same as having intention to possess. Now, in this case, detention is not the same as animus is not the same as animus possidendi. Now, detention is not the same as animus possidendi. Now, animus possidendi simply means that the state must also prove that there was intention from Malema to possess and also have control independently from the owner of the firearm. They were supposed to prove that independently. Now they did not do that. All that they did, they made inferences that, listen, because Malema was seen making use of the firearm, therefore that simply means that he had possession. So they had a basic understanding of what physical control means in law and intention to possess, right? So they did not appreciate the legal definition of these two things, and they did not fully understand that in terms of Firearm Control Act, we are talking about the two legs, which is detention and animus possidendi. Detention and animus possidendi. Now, they did not also fully grasp and understand that for them to be able to charge Malema with unlawful possession of firearm, those two things needed to exist simultaneously, which means you were supposed to prove that he had physical control, and then secondly, you were supposed to prove that he had intention to possess and also had physical control of the firearm so that he can use it independently from the owner. So they failed to appreciate the full definition in law. Therefore, their own evidence, which is the video, contradicted that charge, which is unlawful possession of the firearm, because that leg does not exist and is not also that charge is not also informed by their own very same evidence, which is the video. So that leg does not exist, but the only thing that exists is what we call detention, which is physical control. That one we can see, and the issue of firing of the firearm, that one we can see. But the rest, intention to possess, that leg does not exist. We can't see it because he had immediately returned the firearm. That therefore simply means that the conviction of Julius Malema with regard to the unlawful possession of firearm then becomes what we call the misdirection on a point of law. Let me repeat. If the state has failed to prove and independently investigate the intention to possess, independently from a mere use, right? If they fail to do that, and they've also failed to prove both these terms that they coexisted and they existed simultaneously, they can only prove physical control, but they can't prove the intention to possess. Therefore, that charge falls away, including the charge of position of ammunition. So those two charges fall away. One, the first charge that is going to fall away is unlawful possession of the firearm, and the second one, unlawful possession of ammunition. So those two heavy charges are going to fall away. Why? Because of the state would have failed to prove that the second leg existed as required by the Firearms Controls Act. So yeah, man, I think I've clarified that. As a recap, let me remind you, our authorities is S versus Ngozi, which tells us that temporary handling of the firearm without the intention to exercise control does not constitute possession. Let me repeat that. We have used S versus Ngozi as our authority, right? Now, S versus Ngozi is telling us that temporary handling of the firearm without the intention to exercise control does not constitute possession. So basically that's what happened to Malema. Malema has temporarily handled the firearm without the intention to exercise control, but what the state has done has equated that to possession. Right? Despite the fact that Malema immediately returned the firearm, right? They have disregarded that. Then let's go further to S versus Mbuli. S versus Mbuli is telling us that, listen, possession, right? Possession requires dominion and control, not flatting physical contact. S versus Mbuli is telling us that possession requires dominion, not flatting physical contact. Then the last one is S versus Motsema. Now, S versus Motsema is clear. It's telling us that, listen, the state must investigate the intention to possess independently from a mere use, which the state did not do that. All that they do, they made inferences from the fact that Malema fired a gun and therefore he ought to have had possession of the firearm without fully grasping the legal meaning in law, the legal meaning in law of intention to possess and the legal meaning in law of physical control. They belong in two different leagues. Another one belongs to detention, which is physical control. Another league belongs to animus possidendi, which is intention to possess, and also a physical control, so that Malema can make use of it later independently from the owner. So that second leg is missing. So they failed to grasp the legal meaning of these two legs, and therefore they failed to prove, including their evidence, did not assist. Basically, their evidence assisted them by negating, but all that they did, they started making inferences which were not informed by the very same evidence that they were relying on. So, yeah, man, so boy, Hamilton is more to future advocate. As things stand now, those two charges are going to fall away. Malema is going to take this matter on appeal. Those two charges are going to fall away. Unlawful possession of firearm and unlawful possession of ammunition. Those two charges are going to fall away. When those two charges fall away, basically the prospect of 15-year minimum sentence and the prospect of Malema being suspended from participating in Parliament is going to be a thing of a past. So those things are not going to exist. Those things are not going to happen because the state itself has made a fatal error. So I'm to future advocate. Meet me in my next video as we go deeper. I'm out. Yo, my friend, boy Hamilton, let's say more your future advocate. So yeah, man, let's go straight. into our today's segment as we discuss Julius Malema CIC firearm case. Now, before we continue, I want to clarify once and for all that touching a firearm, right? Even if you can go as far as to briefly handle it and discharge it in the air, the way Julius Malema did is not equals to position, nor is it equals to intention to possess. Let me repeat that. And that's not according to me, that's according to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Now, let me repeat that. Touching a firearm, the way Julius Malema did, and go as far as to briefly handle it and discharge it in the air, the way Julius Malema did, right, is not equals to intention to possess, nor is it equals to position. And that's not according to me, it is according to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Now, because if handling a gun, right, and briefly control and discharge it, right, was equals to intention to possess, if that was the case, we would be having all policemen and women, all security guards and persons, and everybody who has ever handled the gun briefly, right, and discharged it, we would be having all of them waiting to serve their 15-year minimum sentence today, waiting on the queue, waiting to serve. If that was the case. But because of the Supreme Court of Appeal, that is not the case. Because the Supreme Court of Appeal have since long settled that part of the law. Hence, we must say thank you to the Supreme Court of Appeal for settling that part of the law. Because if briefly handling the firearm and discharge it was equals to intention to possess, I'm telling you, everybody, including soldiers and the police and the security guards and all persons, would be serving today, others would be serving and others would be in the queue waiting to serve their 15-year minimum sentence because of that charge. Now, let me take you further. Now, let me take you further to the authorities. Now, in S versus Mbuli, right, the Supreme Court of Appeal, right, stated that possession requires dominion and control, not fleeting contact. Let me repeat for the comment section. And by the way, if you have a problem, let's meet on the comment section. Now, according to S versus Mbuli, right, the Supreme Court of Appeal held that possession requires dominion and control, not fleeting contact. That simply means that momentarily handling of the firearm, or even if I can add on top of that, even if you can go as far as to discharge it the way Julius Malema did, right? That on its own is not equal to position. That does not mean that is position. That's not according to me. That's according to S versus Mbuli, right? But if you have a problem, let's meet in the comment section. Now, let me take it further to another authority. In S versus Malema, the authority that I like, right? S versus Malema, the Supreme Court of Appeal, right, held that intention to possess may not be inferred from mere use. Let me repeat this one slowly for the comment section. And if you have a problem, let's meet in the comment section. Remember, I'm the future advocate. Now, in S versus Malema, right, the Supreme Court of Appeal held that Intention to possess may not be inferred from mere use. Now, in the case of Malema, that's exactly what the state did when they charged Malema, and the magistrate did when he handed the conviction. Right? They inferred intention to possess from the mere use. They inferred it from the fact that they saw Malema in that video handling the gun to such that it discharged it. And then they inferred that usage, right, as intention to possess. So they went against Malema. They went against Malema. Now that's not me. That's Malema saying so. That's not me. Now let's go further. Now, just to confirm, right? I'm taking you further to another authority that confirms what both Mbule and Malema say. Now, this one is called S versus Nkosi. So, what S versus Nkosi is saying, S versus Nkosi, you know, is merely confirming what they are saying. It's merely saying, no, momentarily or brief handling of the firearm, right, without intention to control it, it is not equals to possession. Basically, because what he's saying is he's confirming what has already been said by his brothers, Mbule and Malema. So what Nkosi is saying, Nkosi is saying, no, momentarily handling of the firearm without the intention to control is not equals to possession. Now, you can see, don't blame me, you know, blame the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of Appeal, blame them. But if you have a problem with me, let's meet in the comment section. Now, you can sit there, you know, and shout your lungs out, hey, but no, Malema held the firearm, but Malema discharged the firearm and yeah, but that's not a legal argument. If you are going to argue that no, but Malema held the firearm and to such that it discharged it, that's not a legal argument. That is an emotional one. Basically, we are simply exposing yourself that you did not read Mbule, nor did you read Malema. So basically, we are just being emotional. And you are not even aware that that part of the law has since been settled. So basically, you'll be making the same mistake that the magistrate did, and you'll be making the same mistake that the state did when they charged Malema with unlawful possession of the firearm and unlawful possession of ammunition. Now, if you have a problem with me, let's meet in the comment section, right? Yeah, it's your boy Hamilton, it's not your future advocate. I think I've clarified you guys. Let's meet in my second segment as I'll be dissecting our law as we know it. Yeah, man, your boy Hamilton, it's not. I'm out. Yo, perfecto boy Hamilton, it's your future advocate. So yeah, man. Happy Christmas. Now, as we continue discussing, you know, having a discussion about Julius Malema CIC firearm case, right? So, in our today's discussion will be, I'll be focusing on the internal contradictions of the state case. I'll also be, you know, looking at what is it that was required from the magistrate, right? What is that was expected of her, right? And also look at some of the questions that the court should have, you know, answered, you know, so to try and to try and cure the contradictions that she might have faced as a magistrate, and also try and explain, the importance of answering such questions. Now, we'll also go a little bit into explaining what governs our own legal principles, to such that we'll close it with what I call the final rules that apply when a magistrate decide a case. Now, let's go straight into it. Now, it is now common cause that the NPA has alleged that the firearm belongs to the security company, right? And / the director of the security company, it's Mr. Andrew Sneeman. And we now know that he has since been acquitted. Now, the magistrate has since acquitted him, right, on all charges, right? And subsequent to that, and convicted and found Malema guilty on all charges. Now, the reason why, right? The reason why she was able to do that, it is because of, she has allowed herself to rely on what we call mutually destructive factual evidence, right? She has allowed herself to rely on what we call mutually destructive, contradictory factual evidence. Now, hence, at the end of the day, she ended up acquitting the legal controller and owner of the firearm, and end up convicting the temporary handler of the firearm, right? Now, the only way, right, the only way in which she was going to be able to avoid such an untenable situation, right? The only way in which she could have avoided, such an untenable situation, right? It's only if, when confronted with such contradictory evidence, right, from both the state and the accused, right? All that she was expected to do, she was expected to try and cure such contradictions. She was expected to try and cure such a contradiction, not to ignore them, right? Because it is illogical, right? Because as things stands now, right? Of course, if you don't agree, we can, let's meet in the comment section, right? It is illogical. It is illogical that, one, you acquit, right, the logical owner of the firearm, right? Or you accept, right? Basically, you accept version A of evidence, right? You accept version A of evidence to acquit the owner of the firearm, and then at the same time you accept version B of evidence, right, to convict and find the temporary handler of the firearm, right, guilty. All right, so that's what we call mutually destructive factual evidence. Now, the only way in which she could have cured, right, such contradictions and inconsistencies, it's only if she has allowed herself to answer the following 3 questions, right? Which is, did the lawful owner, right, lose control and dominion, right? Or, let me rephrase the question, all right? She was supposed to ask as to whether, did the lawful owner of the firearm lose control of the firearm before, during, and after the event, right? And then second, she was supposed to ask the following question. Did the lawful owner of the firearm lose dominion over the firearm before, during, and after the event? Now, let me remind you. Control refers to physical control. Physical control, holding the firearm, which is detention. And then dominion refers to the power for you to do anything with what you own, anything. In this instance, the power to decide as the owner, to decide what happens with the gun and the firearm. Now, that's a question that you are supposed to ask as to whether the real owner of the firearm did lose dominion over their firearm before, during, and after the event. Lastly, right, she was supposed to ask, right, if the real owner of the firearm did lose control and dominion over the firearm, where's the evidence? Right? She was supposed to ask that question. Because it is only at that stage, that she was going to be able to know for sure that the position, right, of the firearm did shift. It is only at that stage that she was going to know for sure that as to whether the position that the real owner had over the firearm did shift or not. And it was only at that time that she was going to know for sure that actually, if the real owner did not lose control and dominion, right, over the firearm before, during, and after the event, therefore, there is no way that Julius Malema would have had possession of the property. And the only thing that he would have had is what we call temporarily usage, right? Fleeting contact. Hence, we are referring to him as temporarily handler. So there was no way that Julius Malema would have had possession of the property. Subsequent to that, there was no way that Julius Malema would have had intention to possess if the real owner of the firearm did not lose control, nor did he lose dominion over the firearm. Right? Now, our own, governing legal principles, right, when it comes to contradictions or mutually destructive set of evidence, is that when courts are confronted, right, with such contradictions, they cannot accept both as truth. When courts are confronted with such contradictions, they cannot accept both of these versions as true. Now, that simply means that the one who bears the burden, which in this case is the state, right, to prove beyond reasonable doubt, must prove their case beyond reasonable doubt and disprove the accused's case. Now, after that, all that the magistrate ought to do, it is to adopt one coherent factual narrative, right? That's all that he must do. He just needs to adopt one coherent factual narrative, right? So that when probabilities, right? So that when probabilities between the accused and the state are evenly balanced, right? The one who bears the responsibility to prove beyond reasonable doubt fails, considering, of course, all the evidence. So that the one, when you consider all evidence and when all those things combined, right? When all those probabilities are evenly balanced, right? The one who bear a responsibility to prove beyond reasonable doubt shall fail. Now, in this case, in the criminal matters, right? If all evidence, right? For example, in this case of Julius Malema, if the cartridges can't be linked with the firearm, if the video, they are unclear, as she has admitted, right? If they can't even prove that as the owner, she did lose control or dominion over the firearm, right? If they can't prove that, right? Both accused were supposed to be acquitted. Why? Based on the same facts. Based on the same facts. Now, in closing, you cannot, this is what the magistrate cannot do. Magistrate cannot accept, right, evidence, right? You accept the evidence to acquit the real owner of the firearm, but yet at the same time, you reject the very same evidence, right, to convict Julius. Let me repeat that. You cannot accept the evidence, the very same set of evidence. You cannot accept it to acquit the lawful owner of the firearm, and yet at the same time you reject the very same evidence that you have accepted to convict and find Julius Malema guilty of unlawful possession of the firearm, or find him guilty in all charges, but acquit the real owner of the firearm in all charges. So that is what is called mutually destructive, inconsistent findings. Now, in my second video, now I'll explain to you why Malema, if he's going to take this matter on appeal, all charges against him, I'm putting my head, is it on the block or in the block? Yes, I'm putting my head in the block, right? We can bet 10 rands. Let's bet. Let's bet 10 rands. I'm putting my head on the block. All charges, right? Malema has been found guilty in all charges. And guess what? I'm putting my head on the block that should Malema take this matter on appeal, all those charges are going to be set aside. All of them. And my next video, I'm going to show you step by step. I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you why. But if you have a problem, let's meet in the comment section. So, your boy, your future advocate. I'm out.